Hi, it's Jana, the Queen of Eliminating Chaos, and today we're talking about, are your employees burning out? And recognize right off the bat, they might not tell you, right? So how are you going to tell that they're burning out? What should you look for? So here's some simple things that you could check up on. At an organizational level, are you experiencing a high rate of turnover? And you can refer to industry averages or your competitors' performance to gauge your performance. Are you struggling to recruit internally or externally? And every company and leader has a reputation. So find out what your reputation is. Like, what are the barriers that you're experiencing for recruiting? And at the leadership level, are there some behaviors that you're doing? Like, do you have a habit of emailing your employees outside work hours? And this might look like clearing your mailbox before you go to bed at night, or maybe you log in every Sunday evening to get ahead. Are you regularly taking time off? Do your employees see you going on vacation, taking time off? And are you visibly turning off? Are you visibly logging off? I've always believed fundamentally employees want to do a good job. They're going to mirror your work behaviors. And so here's a funny situation that maybe not funny, but I thought it's funny now in reflection, that I experienced in my very first real job out of college. So I was 22 years old. And back then I was taught to arrive before the boss and leave after the boss, right? That's what we talked about. And so I worked for somebody who worked 7 days a week. They arrived at the office at 6 a.m. They left at 6 p.m. They came back to the office at 10 p.m. and left again for home at 2 a.m. Monday through Friday, and worked 8 to 5 on Saturdays and Sundays, and took 1 week off a year. I very quickly realized I was not going to be able to match their hours. I mean, it was not a realistic expectation, right? And this is extreme. I could never get ahead of them. I always felt like I was behind. It was super demoralizing, and eventually I left after a few years because I never felt like I was doing a good job. Now later in my career, fast forward, when I had some experience under my belt, I dealt with a much less extreme situation. But this individual also would clear their email before bed every night, worked on the weekends, and I'd arrive the next day with 5 to 20 new emails from them, all with things that I needed to follow up on or do. And I still had that feeling, right, again, of I'm always behind. But by this time in my career, right, I had gained some experience, and so I approached them and we talked about it and how I was feeling, and I worked in an environment that was open to having those conversations and culturally encouraged it, and clarified expectations of what they were needing from me so that I wasn't always feeling behind, but they realized that habit was making me feel behind. So I tell you this because remember, your employees, they just may not express how they feel to you, and things like, it just doesn't count to say at the top, this isn't urgent, or, respond to me later this week. They're still going to feel overwhelmed and behind, and that they're not meeting your expectations. And growing companies, you've got to remain vigilant and monitoring for burnout. There's a lot of work. Everybody's trying to help the company grow, and you've got to be vigilant and really pay attention. Do you have high turnover rates, low employee morale? And just know those things lead to chaos, and those will negatively affect your company performance. Visit rkcmanagement.com if you'd like additional information.